Hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm Justin Sloan.
And I'm Paul Zeidman. I'm quite happy to introduce our guest this week, podcaster, manager, promotions. My gosh, he just wears so many hats from the Now Hear This podcast. Let's say hi to Bruce Wawrzyniak. Bruce, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure.
I want to say too at the top of this one, which we don't normally do enough of, hey listeners, if you can go hit the subscribe button and leave reviews, that'd be awesome. We always do it at the end, and I realize, well, what if they don't listen to the end? Then that doesn't do us any good. So yeah. Okay, yeah. So we always start off with our what are we watching, listening to, reading, and all that. I'll get us going, and we can think about some answers. So I finally started watching Suits, which is an old show. I mean, at this point, for me, it feels like it just came out yesterday, just because I haven't been in the loop, I guess. But I enjoyed it. I see why people liked it. I think I checked out this show and a couple others like it at the time and thought, it's just one of these like, oh, rich people being smart shows, and it kind of is, but it has a lot of wit to it, and I'm enjoying it a lot so far. So if you feel like checking out an older show, and it was where Meghan Markle got her start, so it's kind of funny.
Oh wow!
Because she's been I don't know if it's her start, but she was on that show.
That was on USA Network, right?
Maybe it's on.
I
Amazon
think it was.
Prime
I think it
now,
was.
I think.
Oh, it's on. Prime. Wow.
Or maybe it's Netflix. I don't know. Let's see.
Gosh.
Yeah, I think Amazon Prime. So yeah, I've been just checking it. I just popped up on my recommendations or whatever. So I was like, sure, I'll finally check it out, and it's been fun.
Sounds good. I've got two. The first one, I've really enjoyed it. It's on HBO Max. It's the Perry Mason limited series that if you love film noir and you love that kind of old, period piece type of work, it's just fantastic. It's great. A great take on the characters. If you go in thinking it's just like the Raymond Burr show, no, nothing like that. It's kind of like it's very LA Confidential-ish, but just set during the Depression in Los Angeles. And I think they do a great job overall. The acting, the writing, the setting, it's just phenomenal. And I'd heard so many good things about this, and I was kind of like, it was okay. We watched Megan, the killer doll horror movie. I really thought it was going to be a lot, I don't know, a lot bigger, a lot more oomph to it, but it was okay. And I think maybe it didn't help that I think it was originally PG-13. I'm not entirely sure, but possibly. And we watched the unrated version, which didn't really add that much to it. I don't think they really gored it up as much as I thought they were going to. But I thought they did a good job, and I loved the practical effects in it. So, if you like horror and you like that kind of thing, you're all set. Bruce, what about you?
I have been watching Narcos on Netflix and just started the third season last night, in fact. And I'll tell you what, the guy who played Pablo Escobar, so convincing. And, the way that they interspersed real news footage from back when this was actually happening is kind of interesting. It's an interesting technique in that it reminds you that it's real, but then you get caught up in the comparison game of, does this person look like that person? But I thought that the guy who's playing Pablo Escobar is fantastic, but it really kind of makes you take a step back and say, like, where was I when all this was going on? That, I've never really been a history buff, so to speak. So, it's tough enough to stay on top of current events in your own country. Some people would say, come on, Bruce, that thing was such a huge thing that, like, how could you not know that it's going on? But my point is there was entertainment value as well as just educational and learning value. So I've been enjoying watching it, and I'm interested to see this third season unfold now. Like I said, I just saw episode 1 of season 3 last night.
Very cool. I've heard good things about that. So, okay, so I want to do a kind of like a little preface here. So I know Bruce, we've been panelists and participants at the San Francisco Writers Conference the past couple of years. And I think Bruce has so much information and stuff that he can pass on to writers that on varying levels that I think it was great to have him on today. So Bruce, kind of like give us a quick, what's your backstory? Like, what was what got you started into the entertainment business, and like how did you make that transition into podcasting?
Well, I'll try to do the 100 words or less, but my background is all in public relations. I worked in professional sports for many, many, many years, 10 years in the National Hockey League, and then 10 and a half years in the Olympics. And, doing all PR all the time kind of afforded me opportunities to, in the case of what helped me launch Now Hear This, we had an event that was going to be going on. We needed a national anthem singer for it. And I found someone and was just so impressed with this person that kind of started wanting to know what their story was and if there was anything I could do to help. And really just kind of like out of the goodness of my heart, like I just was more or less volunteering. There was a little pushback. I'm trying to make a long story short. Eventually, well, okay, I guess maybe if you want to try to perhaps. And so once I started showing results for them, meaning this girl and her father, they were like, wow, this guy's a big help. Like, let's let's keep him around a little bit more. And then the light bulb went on in my head that, I can actually turn this into a business. And so I launched Now Hear This. And, I think because she was a singer is kind of what started me in that way. And then really kind of just continued down that road. My next client, I mean, if you want to call her a client, being that she was just kind of the beta test, so to speak. My next client, we had years and years and years of lots of success. And so then with the podcast, I kind of got this idea that now this was February 2014 when I started my podcast. So back then podcasting wasn't what it is today. And I just kind of saw it as a marketing tool. I thought maybe I'll do this podcast and some singer that lives in insert city here will hear the podcast and say, maybe this Bruce guy can manage and promote me from across the miles. So that's really why I launched it. And even though I have overwhelmingly stuck with just interviewing guests who are having success in entertainment, primarily music, I've seen the show change in ways that if you're not looking for it, you wouldn't know. But over the years, I've really gone away from maybe this will be a way to find clients. It's really just turned into a wonderful, wonderful way to just meet and connect with people and build my network. And then those people end up helping the clients that I'm serving.
That's great. That's great. So you said you focus mostly on music people, and the name of our podcast is The Creative Writing Life. So even though it's not the writing that we usually talk about, which is usually film, TV, books, or games, that there's still writing involved with music and songwriting. So I mean, what kinds of questions do you get into with your guests? I mean, do you ask them just about like their background and like what are they trying to get a message across, or I just wanted to write a fun pop song, that type of thing?
Yeah, so my questions, I really try to anticipate what the audience wants to ask. And I also really kind of try to get the guest to understand that I really do want to dig deep and I don't want to do the kind of surface thing, tell me what your writing style is. And they'll just kind of gloss over it. And, I'll hit them with follow-up question after follow-up question to where you can tell that on the other end, the light bulb is going on and they're saying, oh, he literally wants to know, and I'll ask things like, do you write by yourself? Do you prefer to co-write? I'll ask things like, do you schedule writing time or is it just spontaneous? If they say, I carry a voice recorder around with me, I still want to know more about that because, I get the people that tell me I will wake up in the middle of the night, with a song idea. And I go, okay, so you're grabbing your phone and you're singing it into it. Like, walk us through what does all that look like? Because I think the people who are just kind of, maybe let's just call them music fans, they don't really understand everything that goes into it. And I think they're just fascinated to hear, okay, yeah, you woke up in the middle of the night and then what? Don't just leave us hanging that we're supposed to assume that you spoke it into your phone, you sang it into your phone. Was it a melody? Was it, an actual hook? Was it an entire verse? Like how much was it? When you woke up in the morning, did you write the entire thing then? Was it, no, I saved it for a rainy day. So I really try to drill down into that stuff, and really get a better idea. I also like, the writers who will tell me that they like to write based on their own personal experiences. And I say, okay, but eventually at some point, you're going to run out of your own personal experiences. And, how does that go then? Do you just dream up stuff? Is it, I'm watching TV? Is it, well, then I do go into a co-write. So as you guys know, there's so many different ways you can go with those questions because there's so many different things that the writer will do, whether he or she goes down this lane, that lane, and it could, it could be entirely different from the guest before them and the guest before them.
Yeah, exactly. But we have that a lot because everybody's story about how they got to where they are today, it's totally different. So that somebody we talked to last week could be a total opposite of the person we're going to talk to next week. And so it's always great from my perspective that to get a glimpse of all these different approaches, and like, this is how it worked for me. But and a lot of people might think, well, it worked for them, I can try it too. But also, not, they don't take into account, like, well, there were so many circumstances that went into how it worked out for that person, that it's not going to be the exact same thing for whoever's listening. And I think, but they think they can at least try to apply that to themselves.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's different too for songwriters is sometimes they aren't writing for themselves. Sometimes it's an artist who is a songwriter, and so they're writing the songs because they plan to record them themselves. But I do like talking to the songwriters who are just trying to get someone else to cut their songs. And does that change it? Because there's some who will do both. There are some who will say, I'm writing this for my next album, but I'm also writing with other people and or for other people. So that really kind of opens the conversation up, because, there's going to be that temptation. Do you hold back what you think is your better stuff for yourself? Or is it, well, wait a minute, maybe I should lead with the best stuff and give that away. If Carrie Underwood wants to cut that, then all of a sudden, things are really going to take off for me. And then at the end of the day, it still boils back down to nobody knows what's going to be a slam dunk hit, because I've had so many guests on my show say that it's the song that you think is going to be a hit that ends up being just okay. And it's the one that when you wrote it, you never really had high hopes for it. And that one ends up taking off.
Okay, I have one more question, then I'm going to toss it over to Justin. Have you ever had, I'm sure you had, like, can you talk about maybe a guest that when it started, it was kind of bumpy and they were very, monosyllabic answers, but that the more questions you asked them, that they were able to, it kind of like unlocked the door, and that they were just like, they were very effusive, very gushing with their answers. And they were really, you could tell they were really getting into being able to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give you an exact name, but
Sure.
what's interesting is when I first started my podcast, I just knew, like, hey, I want to start a podcast and I don't know how to do it. So I went to a recording studio, and it was like that guy was the one that had all the pressure, I felt, because I thought, well, I just need to sit here and ask the questions. And what started to happen is he taught me a lesson, which was, Bruce, just trust the timeline. Trust the timeline, because what would happen is exactly what you're describing, Paul, which is I'd start getting nervous that, oh my gosh, this person's answers are too short and they're not going to be able to fill the whole time. And I'm trying to do at least 45 minutes. And by and large, as you said, once the conversation gets going and they get to feel a little more comfortable, and then they do, going back to what we were talking about before, then they do realize that, oh, Bruce really wants the nuts and bolts here. Then they really start to open up. And I exhale and I think, okay, I do need to listen to this guy's advice, and I do need to trust the timeline, because by and large, it always ends up coming out to, heck, my episodes, I used to aim for 45 minutes. More times than not, they're closer to 50 or 55 minutes, maybe sometimes even an hour. And so, that whole, watching the timeline thing, I've really kind of stopped doing that. If I'm doing it, it's just more out of curiosity, where are we, as opposed to, because the better listener you are, the better you can ask follow-up questions, and then they can get more comfortable because they can tell how genuinely interested you are.
Great stuff. Okay, I'll toss it over to Mr. Sloan.
Yeah, for sure. So I was thinking about the idea of podcasting and as a tool, it's kind of as a writer tool or just as a tool in general for whatever you're looking for. So for people who are thinking about starting a podcast, now that you've learned some lessons and whatnot, do you have any thoughts of what you'd give advice for them? So what to get started, how they go about promoting it? Do you need a huge launch right away to hit some kind of algorithm, or those kind of things?
Well, thinking of your audience, I think what's difficult is a lot of people as authors, they say, well, I should start a podcast. And then it's the questions that you just asked, Justin. It's, okay, well, why? What do you want to accomplish with it? Because all they think of is, well, isn't this a way for me to sell more books? And then they get caught in this cycle of, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to go on my podcast and read people my book. Exactly. You're not going to do that because you do want to sell more books. So what are you going to talk about? So one of the first pieces of advice that I give people when they're thinking they're going to start a podcast is I say, number one, if you're going to do an interview style format, and doesn't mean you have to, but if you're going to do an interview style format, you better write down. Now, when I first started my podcast, Now Hear This Entertainment, I wrote down 20 people that I knew would do it. Not people that I wanted to. I wrote down 20 people that I knew would do it. That way I could say, okay, I'll get through the first 20 and I'll feel good about it. So that's one thing you need to do, is you need to write down like 20 people that you know will do it, not people that you want to. The other thing is, if you're not going to do an interview style format, then you go, okay, what am I going to talk about? And then let me write down probably the first dozen, if not 15 episodes. What am I going to cover on every one of those episodes? Because if you're not planning those before you hit record on episode 1, you're going to get like 3 episodes done. You're going to feel real good about yourself and go, man, I don't know what I'm talking about in episode 4. And if you don't know what you're talking about in episode 4, you darn well don't know what you're talking about in episode 5. And if you don't know what you're talking about on 5, you don't know what you're talking about on 6. And you're setting yourself up for this big crash really fast.
For sure. And so now that you've been doing it for a while, and like SARS has been going for a bit too, like if you were looking at us or yourself and thinking, okay, how do I grow this? How do I take it to the next level? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you advise like a pivot, or is it kind of just sticking it out and seeing where the growth takes you?
Well, I really love doing interviews, and I think that really makes it, I'm going to say, easier, but I just feel like there's so much pressure. If it's a solo show, you're doing it all by yourself and you have to do all the talking every single episode. So, to me, one of the ways that I try to improve it, one of the ways I try to get the show better, is by getting better guests. And so, what I did with Now Hear This Entertainment was, when I had that list of 20 people that I knew would say yes, a lot of them, I had kind of seeded the list. So it was, somebody who had just been on American Idol, somebody who had just been on The Voice, somebody who had, and the list goes on of all these great credentials. So what ends up happening is, you go to potential guests, you tell them who has already been on, and they kind of, without saying it, you can tell that there's an attitude of, well, if it's good enough for that person, it's good enough for me. So that's what I would say is, kind of challenge yourself. And again, I'm not saying that you have to do an interview style show, but as you can hear, there's a lot of benefits to doing it that way. Like I said at the very beginning, a huge, huge benefit has been all the people that I've been able to meet who I otherwise would not have ever met before. Because they're not going to answer your phone call, they're not going to answer your email, they're not going to answer your DM on social media. So, if you're a writer and you want to meet publishers, you want to meet agents, you want to meet, the list goes on, all these people, in the industry, then you start a podcast and you start interviewing them. And PS, then you can get the questions answered that you've always wanted to ask someone yourself. And now I'm just asking you because I'm the host of the show, wink, wink.
Yeah. And I think that you hit on there is like the use of it for connecting with people, for networking is great, regardless of whatever else you're getting out of it. So going back to the idea of the music, did you start off with interesting music? Have you written music as well? Or was that the story about kind of falling into it more, how that came about?
Yeah, no, I don't have a background in music. What I had described was really kind of the way that I fell into it. I mean, I play some guitar here and there, but that's about the extent of it. So yeah. It was really that. And really, what's interesting, guys, is I started down that road with my company. And even though I'm still doing the podcast to this day and interviewing musicians, my business has changed so much as a publicist that I have far, far, far more authors on my client roster than I do musicians. And that's because at one point, Justin, you referred to a pivot. At one point, I kind of had to take a step back and look at my business. And I mean, they always talk about starving artists, and it's true. I mean, musicians, they just don't have a lot of money, especially when you're working, with indie artists. And I kind of took this step back and thought, here I came from working in sports, and I have all this PR experience, and I've started to help musicians. These skills are applicable across other industries. And so I would start talking to other people, and before you know it, I would start getting clients that were authors or small business owner or an entrepreneur, or I had an Olympic athlete at one point. So, my business really evolved over the years. And now, as I said, there are more authors on my client roster than there are music people.
And did we describe yet, like, what you do for your clients?
Yeah, it's funny because, my website says management, promotion, and booking. And as I've talked to potential new music clients, I have said that I'm really trying to get away from doing booking just because nobody likes doing it. I'm no different. And, enough years have gone by that I'm kind of beyond that point in my career where I just really don't want to do it anymore. And I kind of can choose to not do it.
Yeah.
So, the focus seems to have shifted a lot towards the promotion part of those three words. Each website says management, promotion, and booking. I mean, I introduce myself to people as a publicist. As Paul said, you know, that's how he and I met, is going to the San Francisco Writers Conference as a publicist. And so a lot of the services that I'm providing, and I'll just speak to authors, you know, since that's your audience, you know, are things like, you know, getting them into interviews or getting them book signings. Or, I mean, right now I'm doing business cards for one of my clients. You know, we had done bookmarks for her around Christmas time. So, I mean, there's promotional things that come up. You know, there's a lot of different services that fall under the publicist umbrella. I mean, clearly, I hope it goes without saying, there's one that we literally just, her new website that we built for her just went live yesterday. And then social media, you know, it kind of varies from one client to the next. Some people will say, I want to handle it all myself, or they'll say, I want to handle all of it, but Twitter, you can do Twitter for me. Some of them will say, you can do as much of it as you want. I don't like social media. So it really just depends. But I mean, my approach with clients is very much, you know, custom tailored to them. I don't do kind of a package A, B, or C kind of thing, because they could say, okay, I guess package C is probably the closest to what I need. And then you go, well, wait a minute, that means there's stuff in there that you don't need and you don't want. So why? I just don't like that approach, because I'd rather give the client exactly what they need and what they want. I mean, I do use the music example. You know, if you think of, say, a 19-year-old singer, songwriter, guitar player, she lives in Nashville, she wants to be the next Carrie Underwood. Well, the services for her are going to be entirely different from the classic rock band that's based in Tampa, that is guys who are in their 50s and 60s, that's all they want to do is just play some bars on the weekend, and they're perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, no, yeah, the whole publicity angle overwhelms me. So I understand why some authors would enjoy having somebody else to hold their hand through that. Paul, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you were talking about management and publicity. I mean, so okay, let's just go with the 19-year-old singer-songwriter. So like, are they, I guess it's a case-by-case scenario. Is this person looking for gigs? Are they trying to break into the industry? Are they looking for that big deal? I mean, I'm going to go with the theory that you work with each client. Okay, like, what are your goals? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? What is it you are trying to achieve here? And how can I help? I imagine it's probably, you know, everybody has a different path.
Yeah, because I even find with authors that there's some people that are writing books and they're not about, like, I got to sell as many of these as I can, and I want to try to achieve #1 status, and, you know, I want to be a household name. A lot of them are just writing because they enjoy it, and, you know, the book that they write is just kind of a, oh, by the way, you know, or some of them do it because it's a hobby, or they're doing it, say, as a complement to their business. You know, they really want to be a speaker, and maybe they, you know, have a 9-to-5 profession that everything bundles together, you know, what they do for a living, and then being a speaker in that industry, and then also having a book to support it. Obviously, you know, so many people do have podcasts nowadays, or, you know, maybe they have some kind of radio show. And so a lot of these things really converge. And so I'm just kind of there, as you said, you know, to find out from them, okay, what's the priority? What are your goals and objectives? You know, let's get this established from the get-go, so that I'm not spending all kinds of time working on something that you're really not interested in, or it's a very small piece of the pie to you.
Yeah, because I was going to say also, we have to be careful saying that you do work in management, because as soon as a aspiring writer hears the word manager, they immediately think, okay, I'm going to send him a query letter and see if he'll take me on as a client. I think we should probably clarify that it's not the exact same kind of thing as a literary manager. That it's totally different field. So I just want to put that out there soon. So hopefully people will still be interested in your services, but that way you're not, you know, bombarded with, you know, 100, 200 emails saying, hey, here's my script, can you help me get it made?
Yeah, in fact, I had someone that contacted me on a social media platform recently and asked me if I was looking for screenplays. And I think I responded with 1 2-letter word, and you know what that was. But, you know, a good example of that on the music side is, you know, I've had clients who, you know, everything from, you know, a client who she had partnered up with an organization, and they asked her, could you write a song, you know, to go with our cause, and we'll use it, you know, promotionally and as part of our campaign. And so, I mean, there's a whole, and granted, there's entertainment attorneys that step in as well, but, you know, there's a role for a manager in there that I don't want to say it has nothing to do with publicity, because eventually, once that comes to fruition, then I'll put my publicist hat on. But it does kind of become a management thing of, okay, what is this going to look like? What's this arrangement going to be? Especially, when you're working with young clients, that might be, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and they're just getting started out. And a lot of times it's also just having that middleman, because I have seen situations where somebody, and they might be well-intended, but there's certainly lots that are not, will approach someone, literally, I'm not exaggerating, literally the second they come off stage and they're hitting them with a business card, and this person's going, can I just put my guitar down? And I've seen it with writers too. They'll get all excited because they think someone has an opportunity for them. I might be able to do this with my book, or they might want to have me do this, with the book once it comes out. And then someone comes in and looks at it, and you go, that's exciting. I can see where you could think that it appears that way. However, I did some research for you, and in the other shoe falls. You tell them, I don't know if you know, but there's actually a fee to get that done, and sometimes they don't understand that. So yeah, as you mentioned, Paul, very, very important to understand the differences, what I do management wise, what I do promotion wise, and what I don't do. Like you said, when it comes to something like, please don't send me a screenplay.
Okay, so I'll ask one more, then I'll toss it back to Justin. So, I mean, we have had a lot of authors on the show, and you said that you do work with authors. So, if an author was interested in finding out more about what you could hopefully do for them, do you have an initial contact form, or do you have do you accept queries from authors? I mean, what's your process for taking on new clients? I guess in this case, from the writing side.
Yeah, from the writing side, it's, send me an email, introduce yourself, tell me what we've already discussed, your goals and objectives, what you're looking for, and anything that's out there that I could look at first to kind of do some homework on who you are and what you're doing, because it does kind of save a lot of time, and it helps me get a better feel, so that I'm not going into it asking questions that could very easily be presented in an email early on. There is something that I have experienced that I'd love to talk about, which is, I've been in situations where, for instance, I have a client who her new book, this is her second book, it just came out a couple of weeks ago, and I, for all intents and purposes, was not involved along the way at all, and basically was handed the book and said, here you go. And I went, great, congratulations. I'll look forward to reading it. Now, to some extent, of course, we have long sessions where, like, I know what the book is about, and I know her spoken version of, let me just brief you, Bruce, this is what I wrote about. And I'm taking lots and lots and lots and lots of notes as the client is telling me what it's about. But it's also kind of playing catch up. I have to go off of is everything that you've told me, compared to a couple of clients that I have who they are involving me in the process as they're writing the book. So I'm literally reading it, and in a lot of cases suggesting edits to them. So I just think it's important for your audience to understand that, if you're looking for a second set of eyes, I shouldn't say a second, another set of eyes to look at your work, especially if it's the person that's going to be your publicist, who can they can really start making some plans. I mean, one client in particular, I already have so many plans that I'm making as I'm reading what's being written. It's such a huge help. It's such a huge help, because all of a sudden you're really scrambling if you just hand your publicist the book and go, here it is, start getting me out there. And you go, well, okay, I need to read this thing first, so I kind of sound like I know what I'm talking about. So that's really important. And it also speaks to, and I did a presentation on this at the San Francisco Writers Conference earlier this year, which was people saying, well, when do I start with a publicist? And then when can I let him or her go? Which, the second question I laugh at, because it's like, you haven't even hired somebody yet, and you're already thinking about when can I?
They're anticipating their immense success. That's, of course, on the way.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But ironically, I have a client that we've been promoting her book for 7 years now, and it's because she just wants to carry on the legacy of her seventh great grandmother, who was an important woman in parentheses Native American history. So in that case, she wasn't thinking, you know, I'm going to write this book. I want this Bruce guy to publicize it for me, and then I want to get rid of him, because to her, it was so important to keep her seventh great grandmother's story alive that it's like, let's just keep telling this, because it's not about selling the books. It's about keeping this story out there so that more and more people learn about her. So that's something to kind of think about going in if you've never hired a publicist before, is, you know, when am I going to start with this person? And like I said, it might be sooner, it would be beneficial to be sooner than you think, so that he or she can get up to speed on the material. And then when do I kick him to the curb? Well, if this is something that, you know, I guess you don't want to sell books anymore if you say, I don't need to publicize it now that it's been out for 6 months, now that it's been out for 8 months, now that's been out for a year and a half. I don't know.
Okay, and so just real quick, we'll do the plug again at the end. What is the website for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sorry. So nowhearthis.net, and of course that's spelled H-E-A-R. I shouldn't have to say that to your audience, but better safe than sorry. So nowhearthis.net, H-E-A-R, and there is a contact page that you can go to there.
Excellent, excellent. Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back on the San Francisco Writers Conference part of this all, because some listeners might not be aware of the conference. We've talked about it a couple times on here. I'm a big fan. I've presented there, but it's been a few years. I know Paul does now. But what's your take on it? You know, for people who might want to come listen to you, why should they? And in general, the conference overall. Yeah,
I've been there 2 years in a row now, and my gosh, there's so many great speakers. There's such great education. There's so much. I mean, there's a lot crammed into a few days that I really have found, you know, all the different conferences that I go and speak at, the San Francisco Writers Conference, these are not people who are just kicking the tires. They might be in the earlier part of their career, but I can tell that they're committed and that they're serious and that they've made the investment because they want to be there and they want to learn. I mean, you can tell by the quality of the questions, you can tell by, you know, the conversations that you have in the hallway. San Francisco Writers Conference does something really neat, you know, which is the ability to sit one-on-one and have a brief consultation with someone like myself. And I can tell the people who come to that, you know, based on the way they present themselves and how that conversation goes, that they're not somebody who is, you know, I think I'll give this a try and see if I like it or not. They're really invested in it in their career, which I remember being there a couple months ago and talking to someone who was from Dallas. And she said that that was her first writers conference ever. And yet she said they have a writers conference right there in Dallas. And the first one she chose to go to was San Francisco. So again, that shows you that there's someone that's taken their writing career seriously.
Awesome. Cool. All right. And Paul, did we have any last things? I know we're coming up towards the end of our time here.
No, I think that was it. I was just going to add about the San Francisco Writers Conference that it's a recent addition that they started doing some panels on screenwriting. And as someone who's been a panelist, and I've also now been a moderator, that it's really interesting because a lot of the people who attend the conference are primarily authors, and a lot of them are interested in adapting their books into screenplays. But for them, it's a totally new area that they really don't know much about it. And so it's great to see them come in, and a lot of them are older, but they're also very interested in finding out, like, how do I go about this? It's really not just about the business aspect, but it's also about the I guess the mechanics of converting your book into screenplay. Now, you know, Justin, you're an experienced author and screenwriter, so for you it's second nature, like it is for me. I've been doing it a long time, but it's really great to see these people are so interested in finding out more about it. And I think one of the things we're going to try to do in the coming year is like really kind of like expand more on about the basics of screenwriting, because a lot of people want to know about adapting. They want to know about business. That, again, it's a totally new area. So it's great to see that we're slowly expanding that aspect. But as Bruce was saying, that, you know, they come and there's so many great panels for them to attend that may be super specific for them. Like they've had YA panels and mysteries and horror, and just that there's something there for everybody. And I think, you know, if there is a writing conference in your area, not just the San Francisco one, because I'm involved with it, but it really benefits you to attend, because I think it's for networking and it's for education. And I think it's a great benefit to attend.
Yeah, I would add that, a lot of writers obviously try to go it alone and they try to take the DIY approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to make a sale. I'm not trying to get new business out of this statement, but I think you go to something like that and you do start to learn more about the different professionals that are involved in the business. And you kind of understand, as we've been talking about here in our conversation, who does what and who doesn't do what. Because I remember that there was a session I was in at the San Francisco Writers Conference where I told people that, yes, okay, I do know some people, but that's just me leveraging my own connections. So just because I am able to call up someone that I know in Hollywood and say, hey, can I just, I'm doing that as because I have that kind of relationship. It's more, can you do me a favor if I send you this one sheet? Can you take a look and tell me, do we have anything here? And if so, that's going to be about the extent of it. So I do want people to understand that it's just like anything else in life. If you have a couple people involved, as opposed to doing it by yourself, there's going to be so many more doors that are going to open. And so some of my clients have benefited from that, from me being able to contact people that I know in Hollywood and say, can I just send you this and take a look and just give me some advice? That's all I'm looking for. Now, if they want to do more than that, great. But my point being, if that writer had stayed on their own, doesn't have those contacts, it's going to be such a steep uphill climb, as opposed to, okay, let me avail myself to some of these professionals that I have met, make a nice connection at these conferences, follow up with them, stay in touch. I do things like offer people at those conferences, if you want to do a 1-hour Zoom consultation with me, that's great. We can do that. I don't need you to become a client of mine. So you take advantage of things like that, because then you build those relationships, and maybe you come back to a Bruce Wawrzyniak and you say, do you have anyone you can introduce me to who can help me with X, Y, or Z? And maybe that person can or cannot, but it's someone new that you have now at your disposal that you can go to and bounce these questions off of, instead of, guessing or going on the internet or going on YouTube and hoping that you find a reliable source out there.
Or sending out a shotgun approach to sending out queries. It's like, oh, one of them will stick.
Yeah. Great.
100 theory, right?
Yeah.
1% return rate.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it was great to chat with you today, Bruce. Do you want to share again how people get in touch with you and your websites one more time?
Yes, and I do want to clarify, my podcast is called Now Hear This Entertainment. It's different from my company name, which is just Now Hear This. So if you're looking up Now Hear This Entertainment, you can search Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the usual podcast platforms, or when you go to my company website, which is nowhearthis.net, there is a podcast section on there for those that want to look at what I have there in terms of either playing it right through the website or links to go over to some of those major platforms. But as we discussed, there's obviously a contact section that you can go to also if you want to get in touch. So just visit nowhearthis.net. And there's also plenty of social media links there as well.
Great.
Awesome.
It's great
Yeah,
stuff.
Thank you so much. And listeners, if you want to check it all out, let us know what you think. Send us some emails. We're always happy to hear from you. And also, if you can leave reviews, and like I mentioned at the beginning, subscribe and share, word of mouth, all that great stuff. Once again, I'm Justin. You can find my books on Amazon.
And I'm Paul Zeidman. You can check out my screenwriting blog, Maximum Z, at maximumz.blog. I've also got some books on Amazon, the Go Ahead and Ask series. Like he said, he is Justin, and that is Bruce. Thanks for being on the show today. And I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.